The teaching of laws. The work teaches that the Absolute falls under one law, the law of its own will. From that proceeds creation by the first trinity of forces that create the first order of worlds, under three laws, which is sometimes referred to as World 3. In tracing the ray of creation to our Earth, we have next the galaxy under 6 laws, our solar system as a minute part of that galaxy under 12 laws. Its planetary system as a whole under 24 laws, the Earth as part of the planets under 48, and our Moon as part of the planet Earth under 96. The part is always under more laws than the whole, and it is necessary to see this clearly by finding our own examples. The soldier lies under the laws of the captain under the laws of the colonel, and the whole army under the law of the general. Do we tend to put ourselves under more laws in war? Does the day-to-day movement of things tend to put us under more and more laws? And will this make it possible to reach essence more easily, or will we simply tend to become more of a machine, and so mechanical? Are ants and bees under more laws than we are? Have they any individual chance of development? Has anything for them changed in the present era? The more laws that we place ourselves under, the more it can be said that we find ourselves under the law of accident. Personality is under more laws than essence. Essence falls under planetary laws at the note Fa in the ray of creation, or rather the note Si in the side real octave, with both notes being at the same level in scale. Behind essence lies real I, which is under 12 laws, and corresponds diagrammatically to that level represented by the sun. That is, essence is above personality in the scale of being, and real I lies above essence. Psychologically, essence is internal to personality, and real I internal to essence. What is more internal situates higher in scale. We could either infer internal or higher here because both terms having the same meaning. Our being attracts our life. The work teaches this point, therefore from that point of view, we could say that it is our being too that attracts our death, and in so doing, defines the moment of its occurrence. We have therefore to speak about what being means, and in order to do so must pass to another teaching of this work, namely that someone can either be under the law of accident, or under the law of their own fate. It is easy to say that if our state of being attracts our life, then it follows that everything that happens to us is after all fated and therefore inevitable, or as it were, predestined. This was the view of positivist philosophy and its advocates during the 19th century. However, we must understand what being means such as we are, or find ourselves. Our being is an admixture composed of personality and essence, which means that our level of being, as we find ourselves in everyday life, is not one thing, but many different things, and the various parts of our being are therefore under different laws. That part of our being that is essential falls under the law of fate. That part of our being that is personality, particularly false personality, is under the law of accident. Then the admixture of essence, personality, and false personality constitutes our general level of being at any given moment. False personality lies under 96 orders of laws, personality under 48 orders of laws, and essence under 24 orders of laws. Our level of being is therefore a complex matter, and when personality is gradually rendered more passive, meaning it does not take charge quite so often, then our essence begins to grow and assert itself. This means that we begin to grow into our fate. Fate here does not imply something fatal or terminal, it means something to the contrary. Meaning that when we feel more essential, we know more about what our real life is comprised of, what we should do and be thinking. In other words, we begin to know who and what we are, and where we are going, quite apart from what we have been taught to be or imagined ourselves to be in the past. The hypnotism of life is a powerful force. The great and changing events of life exert that hypnotic force upon us. We may vow never to do this or that again, to, for example, say, never get angry again, but when an event comes along, when our pulse begins to race, we forget any prior resolutions and become identified with the event. P.D. Ouspensky said, Hundreds of thousands of people remembering the Great Wars are perfectly certain they will never allow themselves to engage in another war again, and yet look at the world we live in. These feelings and emotions are of course quite right. However, when the events of another war begin to act upon us, we quickly forget, then see everything from a different point of view. Asked why this happens, he said it was due to two things: one, that people cannot remember, and the other is that we are mechanical, a machine acted upon by outer life. It can of course be argued that the media and public opinion constantly remind us of the horrors of all wars. Therefore, if another did occur, practically nobody would fight. However, this omits an understanding of what mechanicalness means. We assume always that we possess real will and real memory. This line of reasoning, however, is based upon the assumption that we are all already conscious. The tragedy remains that we tend to take ourselves as being fully conscious, yet do not see that we are actually mechanical. But what does mechanical mean in this context then? It means that something is driven by something else, as for example by gearing and ratios. We are driven by outer circumstances, by our lives, where life is like a great transmission box that turns the machinery of humankind. People never understand this, thinking instead that they can do, and when something contradictory occurs that differs from the opinions they previously held, they fail to see any contradiction owing to the action of buffers. Buffers are the most terrible things in all of us, because their action is to ease the shock of just such contradictions. The next time that war breaks out, everyone will forget all they thought and felt previously, all the vows and opinions shared publicly. When we are under the general law of our being, we fall under mixed laws because our being is not united, or in harmony. We have, as it were, some eyes that fall under the influence of 96 orders of laws, those particularly that belong to our purely invented side, our ridiculous pictures of ourselves, our self-worship and aggrandizement. Then we have other eyes falling under 48 orders of laws which belong to personality, and finally we have a few eyes very close to essence that are under 24 orders of laws. Essence is our more real side, and behind essence lies real I, which is under 12 orders of laws, and in the cosmic scale, on the level of the sun, represented by our solar being or light body. Consider again the side octave from the sun that creates organic life on Earth. We are, as we know, part of organic life, that big mechanism created for cosmic reason, to transmit the influences coming down from the upper part of the ray of creation, so they might pass through that narrow space defined as the interval between fa and mi, the place of a missing semitone. They are thus able to reach the termination of our particular ray, its endpoint, which runs from this planet Earth to its moon. No one can properly understand what happens on the Earth, with all of its tragedies, unless they have a clear idea that we are part of a living mechanism, not constructed for purposes personally beneficial. The machine called organic life was created by the sun, by influences that are conscious, not only to supply the missing part in the great ray, but also to make it possible for anyone on Earth to develop upwards in the scale of being, through esoteric teaching. We can ascend in this side octave of the sun, because the divine intelligence of that level of the solar or central system has done two things which seem at first completely contradictory. It has created organic life at the point where it had to, and at the same time it has made it possible for anything that is part of organic life to ascend along a side ladder. That ascension depends upon the inner development of any particular individual, whose level of being is characterized by the possession of magnetic center. A person can therefore remain asleep in the great machinery of the ray of creation, and be simply used by it as some link in a causal chain, or they can begin to awaken, realizing that there is another possibility they can follow. And the more they follow that possibility, the more they will help humanity in general. For this reason, the work teaches that we are created as a self-developing organism, and so should see why we are able either to serve life as an end in and of itself, or to take life as a means to some other end. In this, self-development and the methodology of this work teaches that first our false personality must be observed, and then separated from. Through the eyes that form that powerful shadow referred to as false personality or imaginary I, we fall under the law of accident, the laws of random chance and happenstance. In work terminology, we are under the influence of the moon, which falls under 96 orders of laws. If we could but wean ourselves from the continual reactions of false personality, then begin to move inward away from any external reactive side, then many mechanical reactions that we formerly indulged in, taking them as ourselves, would no longer have the same power over us. That, however, is only possible through long and sincere self-observation, through the applied knowledge of this work. Any internal movement of this nature will also be accompanied by the beginning of a liberation from what does not belong to us, a disengagement from the law of accident. When we begin to work on personality, on assuming that we know, we then begin to move still further away from the law of accident, in the direction of the law of fate. Why is this possible? Because we are moving towards the more real part of ourselves, and in so doing casting aside or separating from our outer skins, from painted layers that do not belong to us at all. We are literally casting aside our various masks. Ouspensky once said that people, such as we are, can psychologically be compared to someone wearing an immense number of overcoats. That the action of this work lies in discarding coat after coat. The more dressed up that we are, the more we fall under the law of accident, which means that anything can happen to us, quite apart from our own fate. It means that we are not in touch with our fate, and so not propelled by it, but find ourselves instead hobbled by invented and imaginary ideas of our journey. Here we arrive at the question of people who have what is called strong personality. From the work point of view, such strong personality is actually a great impediment. Such people insist on their rights. They are certain they know what is what, and so convinced that they know what is right and wrong, and in so doing they can project very strong impressions, as long as things continue to go in the way they expect them to. However, when things go differently, they collapse, because they have nothing real behind them. They have no flexibility and no real intelligence, no power of adapting to different conditions or outcomes. Often an apparently weak person is far stronger than those individuals that display a strong personality, who feel they can get a move on, go places, and do great things. They do not see their inner weakness, nor how much superstructure they are carrying which is not themselves at all. Looking then at a soldier that is killed on the battlefield, a causal victim of some train collision, the poor souls drowned in a flood, victims of some viral outbreak or earthquake. Here we probably have individuals simply under the law of accident. They have been joined with the flow, and in this they carry out their orders, and so become victims. They are just ordinary mechanical beings, who may have thought more deeply about the meaning of things once or twice, probably shrugged their shoulders, and done what they are told instead as good herd members. Supposing, though, that these people had thought a great deal, and supposing they realized their situation, let's assume that they could remember themselves, that they were doing their job consciously and not mechanically. This would mean that their center of gravity, of consciousness, was no longer in the external side, but more internal, and therefore closer to essence. Their being would then find itself more under the law of its own fate. If it was their fate to fall victim at that particular moment, then they would probably know it beforehand. If it was their fate not to be swept along in that moment, then they would not. They might perhaps become seriously ill a day or two before this situation arose, or break their leg. They might get up too late and so miss the taxi. It is along these lines that one must think of the problems of accident and fate. Many people, said Ouspensky on one occasion, are dead already by their fate, but remain alive through accident. We can meet them in the street, in the club, at a restaurant, and sitting alongside us at work. Many people, too, are dead by accident, who, had they been under the law of their own fate, might still be alive. We sense these dead among us. They usually occupy high official positions and possess what is called strong personality. They cling to an enormous number of very powerful buffers, receive honors or distinctions, yet they are dead, and may indeed have died a long time ago. The law of accident simply keeps them alive. They are accidentally alive and yet cling to life although they have long since passed. Ouspensky taught that some illnesses are accidental and some fatal, i.e. under fate. How can a law then be accidental? Realize what it means to be under the law of fate. Understand that when we are under the law of our fate, things go more as they should with us. That a coal miner or a butcher would not be made to become an artist, or a politician, and vice versa. Begin to see that what is called the law of accident is really made up of laws that should never act upon us at all. Laws that we were not created to fall under, and which for us take the form of accidents. We get caught or swept up into orders of laws that should not affect us. It is as if a fire is burning, which is under its own laws, but if we insist upon casting ourselves into that fire, then we place our life under the law of accident, simply because, generally speaking, one should not cast themselves into fires. That is not our fate or our destiny. Things happen on this planet, both by fate and by accident. Things happen rightly and wrongly, so we cannot judge really by what happens, because we are not living on a conscious planet, but on a planet very far down the scale of the ray of creation. God's will is not done on this earth, as the opening of the Lord's Prayer teaches us, nor is it done in the earth of ourselves, within our own world view. We are not progressing and things are not necessarily getting any better. People are not magically becoming more conscious. Here we have to think about what this work teaches, then learn how to take up new attitudes to our significance upon this earth. Consider, for example, the law of accident manifested in suicide bombings, or car bombs, mass shooter events. Think about individuals that fly commercial airliners filled with passengers into skyscrapers, or mountains and the ocean, and then consider many other things. Try to think what the work teaches. We cannot have ordinary life attitudes and at the same time do this work. We must think in a new way. We must repent, which means literally changing our whole way of thinking about our existence on this planet and how we pass our time here.